You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward. Here's your host, Leanne Langford.
Hi, welcome to Learning Leader Spotlight, the podcast where we interview the learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. I'm your host, Leanne Langford. I'm the president of Training Pros, and Training Pros is a woman-owned L&D contract staffing company where we like to say, when you have more projects than people, let us find you the consultant to start your project with confidence. I want you to join me today welcoming my guest, and it's going to be such a good conversation. Today we have Kim Hill, the Senior Director of Global Client Learning at Nielsen. Welcome, Kim.
Holly, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. It's really an honor. I love your podcast and to be here to talk about what I do at Nielsen, to talk a little bit about my leadership journey and the learning journey that I share with our customers and our internal users globally.
I'm so happy to hear that you are a regular listener. That's great. I listen to it regularly, of course, but it's usually me on there talking, so I try to listen. When we have a guest host, I love to listen to those as well. So Kim, can you share, just kind of give an overview of our audience of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I work for Nielsen, and if you don't know what Nielsen is the company that does TV ratings. We do so much more than just TV ratings. We measure audience across every single screen. So if you think about your mobile device, if you think about your iPad, if you think about the television, even cinema and audio. So we capture audience measurement across all of the different spectrums. So my role is really important because we measure audiences globally. It's not just people in the US that are watching television or watching their iPads or watching their mobile phones or even watching videos on social media or on YouTube. It's people across the globe. And those people, they want to know how many eyeballs are viewing their content. So we really work with measuring content and advertising, and we share that information with our customers. So the customers of Nielsen, they want to know how many people are watching. Not only do they want to know how many people are watching, but they also want to look at how many people are watching their competitors. And this has been such an interesting landscape for how we teach our customers to use our data because of the fact that it is evolving so rapidly on a regular basis. If you think about yourself, Leanne, just as a consumer of media, how have your media habits changed over the last 5 years? How have they changed over the last 10 years? 15, go back to 20 years ago. Think about how you were consuming media and think about how you're consuming it now. So it's really important then when we engage with our customers, those that are using our data and those that are using our products, it's really important that they understand that changing media landscape in addition to why it's important and how they can return the money that they're investing with us as Nielsen into money that they can make as the businesses that are advertising, the businesses that are selling their products, the businesses that are trying to increase their audience share. Globally, what I do is I work with teams across the world and help them understand, use our data, and really dive into who those audiences are that are consuming the media.
That actually, it sounds like a really fun job. I'm kind of a data nerd. And you really like made my brain go crazy when you started talking about how has the way you watch TV changed, because I remember as a kid, it's you watched what was on when it was on and no other time. There wasn't even VCRs back then. So if you
Yeah.
missed it, you missed it. And then of course, 20 years ago, I had a TiVo. So I watched some live TV, but a lot of recorded TV.
Yeah. And
I don't even have cable now. I don't even watch live TV. If I wanna watch, like, a Braves game, I'm in Atlanta, I run up to the local restaurant and watch it there because I don't even have it subscribed.
Well, and what's interesting about that is when I think about the learning journey, of our end users. The learning journey is really interesting because not only do we have to teach them, there's a lot of software that goes into pulling this information. So there's a lot of true button pushing that we have to be able to highlight and say, this is how you get the data out of our system. And not only do they have to learn how to get the data out, but then what do they do with it? So I think going above and beyond just software and button pushing and getting into the concepts. And the concepts are what I find really fun. I'm a data nerd. I didn't know I was a data nerd until I got my first job in the media industry. And I started running research and I found it to be so incredibly interesting. And I think that's what you need to do is you need to engage and you need to help the users understand the stories that they're telling with the data. So it's not just about the very vanilla, here's how you push those buttons. But why is it important? What story is that telling? And help them turn those stories around. And like I said earlier, make money for their business. Why is that story important for their business and their customers?
So it sounds like a really great way that you've learned how to teach your global client audience. You're not just teaching them, here's how to use the software to get what you want. It's here's the kinds of stories you can tell, and here's what you can use our data to tell, and here's ways to position what you've taught, what you've learned, and a much bigger step from just here's how to use the software.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Kim, what was it about L&D that first attracted you?
Well, it's interesting because I actually, this is a pretty funny story. I got my first job in television when I was just a year out of college. And I remember my very first job, we had our trainer come and see us. And I remember looking at that trainer and I said, I would never want to do that job. Who would want to do that job? And I looked at the work that she did and it looked like she was working so hard and she had so much patience. And I thought, I could never do that. I gave her so much credit, and her and I were still great friends. In fact, she referred me to the position that I have now at Nielsen. Again, we're still very close. And what's interesting is as a customer of Nielsen's, I constantly admired the patience and the drive and the persistence that those trainers had to make sure that they didn't walk away with me not knowing 100%. It was challenging at the time, and I don't wanna age myself at all, but there wasn't the ability to do virtual trainings. And when I needed a training, I had to pick up the phone and call her and say, "Hey, can we do this over the phone? Or could you get on a plane and come work with me side by side?" So again, I really admire the people that were in that role. When I eventually came to Nielsen after 2 television station jobs, and then I worked at a actually, it's a global advertising agency. When I did come to Nielsen, I took a job as a trainer. And I remember thinking, wow, I have really big shoes to fill. The position that I took over was another person who had become a good friend of mine as the client customer relationship grew. And I just remember thinking, I have a lot to learn about patience. I have a lot to learn about persistence. I have a lot to learn about being able to work side by side with customers with empathy and help them through what their challenges are. And it was interesting because within my first couple of months, it came very naturally to me. And I thought a job that seemed very daunting that I really didn't see myself succeeding in from the client side, from the customer side. I really took it by the horns and I found that it was something I felt really passionate about. I loved working with those clients. I loved working with the end users to help them really understand how to use it because I came from that client side. And that just really grew. When I then moved into the leadership role, I was able to take not only those skills that I learned as a trainer and put those into training the trainer, but also leading that group of trainers. And I think that's really where my passion started to grow once I took that leadership role and I saw that trickle effect as it went downstream into my downline.
So that is a great story of how you joined and the fact that you thought it was going to be a crazy hard job, but you finally embraced it and jumped in. I do have a lot of admiration for people who facilitate all day, every day. That is such a hard job. I did it in my early 20s. I couldn't do it now.
It's interesting because that you say that. I look at my team, and there were challenging customers along the way. There are customers that you're trying to train them virtually, and I think that that's one of the challenges that we could speak about, in the upcoming moments that we have together. Is it's a really big challenge is to move everything virtually when you can't physically hold a customer's hand and help keep their accountability towards what they are learning. It's a huge challenge that we're facing right now. But I look at my team right now, the team that I lead. I have a global team, and I definitely empathize with what they're dealing with. I've been in their shoes. I know that there's challenging days. I know that there's days where customers, they hang up the phone and they write me an email and say, "This person did phenomenal. I'm so grateful for what they did." Sometimes we get feedback where there's an ROI attached to it. So we can actually say, "Hey, we helped this television station make this much money based on the work that we did with them." And those days are so rewarding. And I make sure that the team underneath me, I make sure that their success is showcased anywhere and everywhere. So I take all of that great feedback and I push that up the chain, down the chain, around the chain. I make sure that everybody's aware of the hard work that they put in because I know it's not easy.
That makes my heart warm that you're making sure everybody's getting a lot of PR for their good work. So you've been in L&D a while. What are the most impactful changes you've seen in the last few years?
Well, let's go back to that question that I asked earlier. I said, how have your media habits changed in the last 20, 15, 10, 5 years? Think about that from a learning perspective as well. I mentioned it a couple of times, but 20 years ago, I had a trainer that I would pick up the phone and we'd do a phone call, and she'd try to walk me through a few things. And it was very challenging because how can you how can you successfully do that over the phone? The next best option was get this person on a plane and have them fly out and hold my hand. So I think when you're in a distance based relationship, when you're trying to work with end users who are not directly next to you, that's one of the biggest challenges. So thinking about what the pandemic did to us as well. Moving teams that are may have been literally in the cubicle next to you or just down the hall, or maybe, even within the same city, if you're thinking about some of your customers where you could just go to their office. So a lot of things did move virtual. So I think kind of that virtual mindset and being able to really guide them through what they need to understand from a virtual aspect. But what that also brought to the table was it brought a lack of attention span, but it also brought the need for more on demand. So when the pandemic happened, we found that people, they were trying to work around their kids' schedules. They were trying to work when they could. They were trying to work with customers who were dealing with the same thing. The customer may not be ready to do their work until 8 p.m. So we went from a really live only model to an on demand model. And that on demand model, what that did was that required Nielsen to invest in a brand new LMS. So within the last couple of years, we did bring on board is a really strong, sturdy learning management system. We built that from the ground up over the last couple of years, and then we actually moved to a new system this year. And the new system that we moved to this year, it required us to the reason why we moved to a new system is we needed a bigger capacity because we found that just having a handful of long form, large training modules, it wasn't really going to work. We needed to move to now what I believe the pandemic had a lot to do with it, is moving to more of what I call a TikTok style mindset. People, they want short snippets of information. They want 5-minute videos. They want little clips. They want to be able to fast forward to what they need. And with our old system, we weren't able to do that. Really, we only had the standing power to hold up long form videos, certification programs. All of that was really based on not being having everything available end to end. Now what we need to give people is we still have the option for end to end, but people don't have 30, 45 minutes, an hour to sit down and watch a full training video. They may get to that. That may be their foundation, but then what we do is we supplement with a lot of these micro trainings. And so that's really where I see moving. I mean, not even moving. It has moved to the attention span and making it so we need to provide shorter clips of information. We need to give them small bites of information, but we also need to put certification and accountability into the mix as well. So they can watch a 5-minute video, but are they absorbing it? Are they retaining what they've learned? So then doing those knowledge checks along the way, I also find are going to be really important. Certification, that's usually some sort of a digestion of content with those knowledge checks, and then you pass the test. When you pass that test, what does everybody like to do right now? They like to brag about what they did on social media. So being able to provide digital badges, virtual badges, being able to put things on email signatures with their accomplishments, that's another really big one. And then digital resumes. So a lot of resumes right now, they're not a piece of paper that you walk into your potential employer. You want to be able to put your successes and your wins on those digital resumes. So those certifications, those digital badges, all of that is gonna be really important as we move into the future as well.
That is definitely interesting. And I love the digital badge situation. When that first came around, I was like, grown-ups are not going to compete for badges. Yes, we really
Yeah.
do. We like our badges.
Well, and what we found is it's really interesting with the digital badges because what it does is it induces FOMO. So if you think about the fear of missing out, if I'm sitting if I'm scrolling on LinkedIn and I see my coworker, they are certified in, let's say, um, AI, an AI training. I look at that and I think, well, they're certified in AI training. So now I want to get certified in AI training. And we find that it's really this snowball effect where the more users at our our customers business entities, the more users that get certified, again, the FOMO and saying, "Hey, I wanna do that too. I wanna be certified in that as well." And what that does is that just makes what Nielsen does stickier. It drives more adoption and use of our products and our data, and what that does is that helps for us when we come up for renewals, but also driving new business. So it's win-win for everybody.
And it's also great for your students if they can get that certification and then they apply for a company in a different media company. Hey, I've got this certification from Nielsen that's showing that I'm already ready to work in your system. So,
Yep. Absolutely, absolutely, yep.
oh, wow, that's great. So, are there any other big changes you see for the L&D space in the near future?
I think, I just think really about utilizing the on-demand materials, being able to have people obtain their learning whenever they can and wherever they can. And I think for leaders, I think that the leaders of the groups that are learning, the leaders of the learners, that's kind of hard to say, but the leaders of the learners, they also want to see that accountability for their teams. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. I know we went through phases of quiet quitting and we went through different phases of people working hard and people, not working so hard. And I think just having records of what people are doing, whether that's certification, whether that's through the LMS. I think that there's also another, one of the things that I'm really pushing for with our HR groups is that these certifications and these program completions, they need to go into internal resumes as well. So if we're looking to promote internally, I really want to say, hey, you know what, this person checked 5 of the 6 boxes. I think that that's great. I think that they should have a leg up on those promotional opportunities that are available. And I think that that's really a driver of motivation for internal customer or for our internal users of our products and data services. And I think the same thing for our customers as well who use our data and services. Again, talking about that FOMO, bragging about what you know, saying, hey, you know what? I am certified and this guy is not. So you should hire me.
It's that's a great summary of where we're going. I think that there's so many different directions we're headed right now, but certifications and badges and gaining being in control of your own learning are huge right now. Um, when you look back, who has been your most influential professional mentor?
The great thing at Nielsen is that we do have a mentorship program, and I think that that's been really helpful. You know what? I'm actually going to rewind. I'm going to rewind to a stage in my life when I was first entering the business. I came right out of college, and my very first job was I rented cars, and there is a very famous company out there. I won't put it out there, but a very famous company that hires recent college graduates. And it was an interesting job because I just wanted something. I was done waitressing and I wanted to get my break. I have a degree in advertising, and I was just trying to get into the business, right? And I didn't know what that was going to look like. And one day I was renting cars, and this is the company that picks you up, which means that at the time I was a glorified taxi driver. This is pre-Uber. I didn't get paid extra. No tips were there. But this day I had such a phenomenal tip that came to me. I picked up a woman, and we were just chit-chatting in the car, and she said, "Do you like what you do?" And I said, "Well, today I kind of do. There's days where you do and you don't." And he said, "But today I think I do." And she goes, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I have a degree in advertising." And she said, "Oh, that's interesting. I own an advertising agency." And I said, "Oh my gosh." And I just got goosebumps just telling you that story because that day changed my life. I got my first job. I interviewed for about 4 months to get this job. And got my first job as a research analyst at a local television station in Tucson, Arizona. And I will say my professional mentor that I'm so grateful for this person for my entire life is because they gave me the opportunity. Not only did this person hire me as, a pretty fresh out of college graduate, but they taught me a lot about business. And along the way with business, I remember one day he said to me, "You know what, Kim, you have it." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Moxie." And I said, "Oh, you know what Moxie is?" So I had to look up what Moxie was. And he's like, "You just have the drive. You have the passion, you have the perseverance." And knowing that he let me take control. And I think that's one thing that everybody really needs is they need to hold themselves accountable for their own learning. Kind of like what we're talking here today. He said, "You have the Moxie. You don't need me to hold your hand. I will be here and I will support you and I will teach you what you need to know about the industry." But you interviewed for 4 months and you would not leave me alone. I wanted somebody with experience and you would not stop bothering me. And that was, there's going to be a date on this podcast, but that was in 2004. So that's, we're going on 22 years ago that this was. And it was such a remarkable moment for me. And I'll never forget what the word moxie means. You know, a young girl, I really it was interesting once I found out what he called me that day.
Yes, it's a really good, old person word, like grandpa word. Well, at this point, great-grandpa word. Well, that's a good story, I love it. What do you think is the most important skill right now in the workplace?
I think the most important skill right now is perseverance. It really is. And I think about people who when they have to learn. Learning is not easy. And I have 2 children and I look at my children and there's days where I envy them. I look at what they're learning and I wanna be back in their shoes. I wanna be in a situation where I'm kind of forced to learn something. And I think in a workplace, when you're an adult, yes, you're forced to learn, but you're not forced to actually absorb, and you're not forced to really hold yourself accountable to understand what you're actually learning. And I think that as we get older, it is challenging because there's not really that grade. We're not walking away with a report card at the end of the day. We're not walking away with a progress report. We're not going to pass or fail. We're still going to have our jobs. There are people that, they may lose their jobs because they don't know the information, but there's really not that sense of accountability. So knowing that you have to get out there and you have to have the perseverance to learn, to understand. And if you don't understand, you have to ask questions, and that's okay. I think people are also still scared to ask questions. I like to tell people that if you ever don't know, ask me. ask me. I am an open book. I will never judge you for not knowing. And guess what? I'm not always going to have the answer. And that's okay, because then I get to learn something while I go hunt down that answer for you.
That's an interesting thing that you say about people are not okay with not knowing the answer sometimes. I feel, and maybe it's changed, but when I was a student, being wrong was a bad thing. It was punishing. And being wrong as now that I'm in the workforce, I try to tell my team, doing something the wrong way is the best way to learn how to do it the right way. You have to be able to make mistakes to learn, but I don't think that that's been taught in the last few decades in school. I feel like it's you're right or you're punished.
Yeah, and one analogy I use a lot, and I've used this kind of my whole life is, if you could drive the car for me and you could get me to where I need to go, but let me drive that car and let me get lost. Because when I get lost, I have to figure out my way back home, or I have to figure out my way to wherever I'm going. And if you actually take the wheel and you drive me home, I didn't learn anything. And so to me, I think that allowing people to make mistakes, allowing people to ask those questions and, stop at the gas station and say, this isn't my neighborhood. I don't know where I'm at. Can you help me get home? That's okay. You can do that. And as long as you find that great support group around you to help you get there, that's going to be really important. And if you don't have that support group, go find it. I think that's really important to have not only a best friend at work, but also that support group to help you when you are feeling lost.
Great, great advice. All right. So now, what is your favorite source for industry news and information?
Oh, that's a good one. I love podcasts. I really do. But the interesting thing about the work that I do, the majority of the research that I'm doing on a regular basis or trying to learn about is the media industry. I try to learn more about the learning and development landscape and trying to get out there with other, um, you know, sources of information there. I do rely very heavily on the tools that I have available to me. So we work, my team, we technically sit within customer experience. So we deal a lot with customer success. For me, from a customer success standpoint, I look at myself as a consumer of anything and everything. I had one of my streaming providers, I had an issue with my password and I was trying to switch from one email address to another email address. And I called this company and they are a very, very, very large company. And I got the best customer success customer service from this particular streaming service. I talked to a human being. They made sure I didn't hang up until everything was complete. And so I look at these real life examples as more of my own personal learning journey in not only the learning and development landscape, but also the customer landscape and being able to deliver what a customer needs. I'm a Cancer and I'm an empath. And so I think there's a lot to be said about how I am treated and how other people are treated. And so I take everything that comes along with that very, very seriously.
That's great, great information. And I too am a huge podcast consumer. So um, I walk the dog several times a day, and there's a podcast going every
Yep.
time. So, last question, and this one is really for me. What is one book that everyone who wants to be a learning leader should read?
This one, so we had a leadership, it was a senior leadership meeting last year, not this past year. And we had a guest speaker who came on, and it was Angela Duckworth. Angela Duckworth, she is my idol. Her book is The Power and Passion of Perseverance. So you can tell by a lot of the things that I mentioned earlier, I'm really about drive. I'm really goal oriented. I'm really about drive. But her passion project is grit. One of Nielsen's values is that we move forward every single day with grit. And if you don't know a lot about grit, go to Angela Duckworth's website. She has a test where you can actually test how gritty you are. I actually had my team do it, and they all scored pretty well, but it was really interesting to just kind of see everybody's scores because you can kind of feel how gritty people are from afar. But really, what she talks about is the difference between talent and grit. And talent, it doesn't necessarily predict success. And grit is usually a better predictor of, success than talent is. So I think that if you think about grit and if you think about that determination and that perseverance, that's something you can't really teach a lot of people. We talked about moxie earlier. With moxie, I don't believe that that's something that you can really teach somebody. I think that's something that's in you. I think that gritty nature is something that's in you. So Angela Duckworth, The Power and Passion of Perseverance. I definitely recommend that book to anybody. She has a couple of podcasts that are out there. If you use Apple Podcasts, which I do a little search for Angela Duckworth, and you'll find a whole bunch of them where she came on as a guest speaker. But I will be honest, I'm a pretty big fangirl of her because of the fact that she came to one of our conferences. But she delivers everything that she delivers in book form and audio form. It's very easy to understand, and it really makes sense. You think about drive, persistence, and, like I said, accountability, making sure that you're accountable for what you want to learn.
So I love that book recommendation. So those things go on my Audible to listen to. And I can guarantee you by the end of the day, I will have gone and taken that grit assessment.
Awesome. You gotta tell me your score. You have to tell
I
me your score,
will.
please.
I will. I take every assessment I can get my hands on. One of them I've done is the Colby, and one of the things that came out of it was that I'm an off the chart quick start, which means as soon as I think that we should do something, I'm already on it before while everybody else is like, "Well, let's lay out a plan." And I'm like, "Done. It's ready. Let's do it." You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna check that one out. Colby, you said?
Colby with a K, yeah.
Okay, okay.
But yeah, so I'm gonna check that out. I'm gonna take that test, and I'll definitely, look up her book and see if I can download an Audible because that's the best way for me to read a business book,
Same.
truthfully.
Yep.
Everybody
Nope.
has their best ways.
Yep, yep. No, I'm the same. I'm the same. Yeah.
You have been an amazing guest today, Kim. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. Thank you so much, Leanne. Thank you to everybody who's listening out there. This is such a fun journey. Make sure you go. Any certifications that you guys can do, go on social media, share them. Again, it's the way of the future.
It is the way of the future. So, Kim, as you said you've listened to our podcast, so you probably know what I'm gonna say next. Our charity at Training Pros is that we plant trees in the world. Right now, we're planting trees to help, preserve the wetlands in the world, and we're gonna plant 5 trees in your name as our thank you for coming on the show.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome, and again, thanks for coming. And that's it for this week's episode of Learning Leader Spotlight. We hope you join us again next week when you hear from another learning leader from another industry.
Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.